Hey everybody, I'm Mark Walters with BigFanboy.com, and I'm sitting here with Nicholas McCarthy, the director behind the PACT. We're at the Dallas International Film Festival, and I just rewatched the ending of the movie again because last night I watched the movie right before I went to sleep. So thanks a lot, by the way, for ruining my peaceful night's sleep. But no, it's funny. I really like going into movies not really knowing much about them, and this particular film, I literally got the screener, I sat down, I watched it. And it's one of those great films that kind of takes you on this ride because, you know, you think at first it may be just kind of like almost like a crime noir, missing person type thing, and then it goes in a really radical direction. And I love everything about it. I think it's incredibly creepy. You're a sick man, and no, I'm just kidding. No, but I guess talk a little bit about it because this went from the journey of being a short into a feature-length film, and how did that whole sort of process kind of play out from going from short to feature film?
Well, you know, I had made short films for a long time. I mean, like a lot of people, and I after a while, had a few shorts at festival. I had one in Sundance in 2005, and that was like a huge kind of step up in a way. It's not that having a short there did anything for me financially, but it was like all of a sudden showing your stuff to strangers made me think, well, maybe I could do this. You know, maybe I could achieve this dream of making a movie. Mm-hmm. And I always knew I wanted to make a horror film, so I started to write, and I started to write scripts, and got a few jobs writing horror films that haven't gotten made, thankfully, in a way, and was always kind of pushing towards trying to get, you know, the feature made, because, you know, I've been a huge horror fan since I was a kid and liked all kinds of movies, you know. And so finally what happened was I made the PACT short almost out of frustration because it wasn't made as like a trailer. And it's a, you know, if you've seen the short, it's actually a very different movie than the feature. The feature in a way is like a straight down the middle horror movie. Yeah. Even if it has some twists and turns that are unexpected. Whereas the short was almost like this kind of character piece with this creepy ghost story atmosphere. And I made it just because I wanted to make something, and because it was this story that had been kind of burning in me for a while to tell this kind of ghost story in an unusual way, and to kind of take all the things that I had observed in a lot of directors that had made, you know, huge impressions on me, you know, when I was a kid, people like John Carpenter and Dario Argento, and yeah, and also the kind of older horror films, the movies that Val Lewton produced in the 40s, I Walked with a Zombie and Cat People, and this kind of creepy, poetic atmosphere of those movies. I just wanted to do something like that, so we made that short in 2 days. You know, it's 10 minutes long, and it starred Joel State, who did a phenomenal job in this role, and that movie got into Sundance, and I finished it about 2 weeks before Sundance. And the first time I'd watched it with an audience was at Sundance. And then a week after the festival, I had this meeting with these guys, a company I'd never heard of before, and they said, we want to make a feature. We want to make a feature out of your short. And I had been just so chomping at the bit to make a horror movie for so long that I saw this was this opportunity. It was going to be a low-budget movie. We were going to shoot it, you know, in a real tight schedule. But I knew I could have control over it because it was small. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, from before there was even a script, like when I had that meeting and there was no script to when we finished it, it was like 40-something weeks or something. Like I wrote it in 6 weeks. 2 months later we were casting. Just about 6 weeks after that we were shooting. And I think we were done with the movie, finished about 3 months after that. So it was just like,
yeah, and you were telling me earlier you shot this in 18 days, which just a breakneck days. Schedule. My God.
Yeah, yeah, it was Roger Corman style. But you know, Roger Corman was one of my heroes growing up.
Yeah, he's
know?
Great. He's terrific.
So you know, the idea of just getting, you know, we would just make these incredibly ambitious shot lists, and we had this incredible crew. A bunch of the key people who had done the short, you know, went on to do the feature, and they would. You know, these are people who usually get paid a lot of money to do this kind of stuff, but they were doing this, like me, as a labor of love, to just try to make a movie that's fun, a little different, and in some ways more ambitious or unusual than the kind of stuff that they had been getting paid for. So we got to, you know, construct that creepy house and put up that wallpaper and cast, you know, without revealing too much, some very creepy people.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
yeah. I didn't want to
blast.
mention it, but yeah, there's some great casting going on there. Now, and that's also one of the things. Like when you make a film that is more of a modest budget film, and that kind of schedule, does it seem like there's more of a sense of community on set? Like people really kind of get behind the whole process of it and really believe in the product, as opposed to like a big studio picture where people are just collecting a check, basically. You know?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in theory, yes. You know, wait until I make that studio movie.
And then see the difference.
We'll
yeah.
see. But it absolutely was like there was this kind of team of us. It was like a family that were making this film, and the people I think who work in film production, like it's a really cool, it's a really scary, insecure profession in a lot of ways. But I found that the people who work, you know, as grips, as people who work in the art department, people who work as assistant directors, cinematographers, it's the most interesting work because it's always changing in some way. Yeah. And you have to make sacrifices every day. As a director, when you're directing something, you have to make a sacrifice, you know, about like the performance isn't how you imagine, so you work with the person, or you can't get that shot, so you have to figure out something else. So the people that work on films, and like they do it because they love it, and that makes them cool. So I mean, the whole experience that we had in the movie, we did so many ambitious things for our budget that almost every day was some new, you know, kind of, oh, we have this one thing, like, you know, the actress is going to be pulled around on wires. Like, it's like,
yeah.
You know, there was no money to do that. I mean, it was like...
It looks phenomenal. I mean, it really sells it, you know,
yeah.
when you guys, the finished product. And the film has a great visual look to it, too. Like, I mean, the way that you set up certain shots and just kind of moving in and out of rooms, it's incredibly unsettling. And to me, that's one of the things that I think really kind of sells what's going on in the film and kind of keeps, you know, the audience member like intrigued in that, you know, you feel uncomfortable, but yet you can't look away because, you know, you just got to know where it's all leading to.
Yeah.
You know, what the visual ideas and things like that, was that kind of, again, born from inspiration of filmmakers and people that you had admired before?
I think, I mean, when we did the short film, it was the first time that I got to sort of, you know, try to use a horror atmosphere. And that was a, you know, that was a choice that I made. I mean, I could have made that film. If you ever see the short, the script, it doesn't have to be shot like a horror movie, but I was like, I'm going to shoot this like a horror movie. And what I realized is it gave the kind of experience that the audience was having, like this kind of, this sense that there's a third person that's kind of guiding them through this thing, and it was unsettling for them. James Faust, the artistic director of the Dallas Film Festival, he approached me at Sundance, and because he had seen the short, and he confessed to me that he hates horror films.
Yeah.
And he didn't realize when he started seeing the short that it was going to be a horror movie, and he got really upset and was really disturbed by the film. And of course, I took that as the greatest compliment, you know.
Yeah.
But it's something that I love to do, you know. It's like, and it does come from looking at other filmmakers.
You mentioned Dario Argento, and I can definitely see some of that kind of that sensibility there. You also took Casper Van Dien, one of the prettiest guys on the planet, and sort of uglied him up a little bit. But you know, it's funny. I've met Casper on a couple of occasions, and he's like such a nice guy.
Oh, yeah.
And it was great getting to see him kind of play against type in this role. Like, I mean, he really, you know, he's a very kind of gruff, you know, grizzled-looking guy. I mean, was that kind of an intentional choice to kind of cast a guy that you wouldn't expect to play that part?
Well, really, I mean, that role was one of the last roles to be cast, and we were actually shooting the movie when it was cast, and it was a kind of bizarre moment when I learned that Casper had come in to read for it, and I was like, the Casper Van Dien came in? And we didn't know really who we were going to get for that, and I met Casper, and it's like, he's like, he's so handsome, and I would just tell the makeup girl, I'd be like, just make it look like he hasn't slept, and like I would tell him to not shave and stuff, but I swear to God, it's like no matter how much I would do, he still would just be like, you know, it's like if you ever want your ego taken down, have Casper Van Dien just like hang around with you, and like every woman, and probably about like 20% of all men around you will just follow this guy around everywhere, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about was kind of again, going back to sort of the unsettling aspects of the film, is that, I think it's interesting in certain scenes that there's moments that there's showing and no telling, and then there's a lot of moments that are telling and no showing, and and is it kind of an interesting balance figuring out just exactly what to give to the audience and what to hold back on some of those things?
Yeah, it's something that I've always been interested in, and for me it goes back to, I remember I had a teacher who once, I think we watched the movie Sophie's Choice, and on a blackboard he kind of wrote down all the characters' names, and then we like as a class went through and talked about what their whole lives were, and then he said, okay, well, what happens in the movie? Like, what pieces of their lives do we see? And that lesson has always kind of stayed with me, this idea that, like, a story is a fragment of your character's life, because you should know your character's whole life. It's in the same way that, like, you go not be their origin story, but you might then have an idea about, well, maybe their origin story, or in the next film you get to see their origin story. It's like that idea of these people having these whole lives, and in the PACT short, very much so, but also in the feature, there's a certain thing that I was trying to do with the way that the story was told, that not all the questions would be answered on screen. And I also realized it would piss some people off, but to me that's kind of part and parcel with this idea of mystery,
Yeah.
And that in some ways the most powerful mysteries are the ones that answer all the questions enough that you are satisfied, but there's still something that's lingering there. I mean, that's a horror movie.
You also did something that I don't know that I've ever seen in a film, and if for those of you that are familiar with ghost photography and paranormal photography, there was an element in there that I don't want to give away, but something that I thought was really interesting, in that seeing someone see something through a camera and having it kind of be right there in front of them without having to look at it after the fact. And I found that incredibly intriguing when I was watching the film. Was that something that, again, what was the inspiration behind that?
Well, ghost photography, which it's really well exploited in this Thai movie called Shutter.
Yes,
which I'm a huge fan of that movie.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the remake they did of it, but the original is terrific. And what's great about that movie is it's all about, like, the pre-digital, kind of world.
Yeah.
Like, it was made, like, I think, like a year before everything went digital. So it's all about
It's great
photographs.
that Ghost made the jump to digital too.
Yeah, well, but that's the interesting thing about, like, you look at all those J-horror films, and there's that obsession with technology.
Cameras,
and it really goes back to, this idea that, like, when the camera was invented, if you could take a snapshot of something and that would be a kind of, you'd be looking at that scene forever, and that's what was there. Somehow this idea that a camera could capture something that the eye couldn't see, it started, like, right when the camera was invented, and there's so many examples of ghost photography. So the scene that you're talking about in the movie, I think that just came from that I made some kind of leap where I thought, well, what if every time you look through that camera that thing was there?
Right.
The camera could always perceive it, because you have a digital camera and you can always see what it's seeing.
Yeah, because when you're looking at a camera, you're not looking at what's in the background, you're looking at what you're taking the picture of.
Yeah.
So if that thing was there in the picture, why wouldn't it always be there?
Yeah.
The film is The Pact. It's a really great, creepy, scary, just wonderful, experience. I enjoyed the hell out of this thing. Where are you guys going after this, Dallas International?
Well, it's going to be released.
It's sold. So,
yeah. IFC is releasing it in. It has a theatrical release in early July, and it's also going to be on video on demand. And in June, it opens in the UK, like as big as Harry Potter over there. It's like a huge release. So
great.
Hopefully, we'll get to go over there.
Huge in the UK. Nicholas McCarthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it.
All right.
Nice talking to you.